welcome to 3 Count Commentary. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we got another Voices of Wrestling themed video. This one is entitled, What CM Punk Took from AEW. And this is an essay written by Jesse Collins on December the 18th, 2023. It's not entirely wrong. It's actually about 70% correct. The problem with it is the way that it's written, and it is incredibly humorous. So we got to talk about this. And that 30%, that 30%, man, that stuff going to jump out at you wild and crazy. But let's get into this. Let me clear my throat a little bit. When CM Punk was finally fired from All Elite Wrestling, following yet another backstage incident, this time engaging in a physical altercation with Jack Perry and, according to some sources, threatening Tony Khan, it was a cathartic release. Punk had been a figure in AEW that was beyond polarizing, a character so larger than life, an entire industry of wrestling news media could be propped up based on rumors and reports of his backstage antics. Even as he spent time away from AEW, recovering from surgery after All Out 2022 and serving as a de facto suspension, Punk remained a constant target for speculation and palace intrigue into AEW. Following several other instances, Punk finally broke AEW, and Tony Khan was left with the only logical decision to make given the circumstances: fire CM Punk. Firing CM Punk was an extremely unusual choice, given the history of pro wrestling, which has almost always followed the whims of its biggest stars. Khan fired his biggest star because he understood that he was doing long-term damage to his brand, even if losing Punk, and in turn making him free to walk straight into his competition, the WWE, was going to be a short-term loss for AEW. In most cases, in wrestling history, the promoter always takes the short-term boost, typically believing that the long-term problem can be solved in time. Let's take a pause right here because that's just called business, right? If somebody actually makes money for you, you deal with them. You know, they could be a headache, but you deal with them. You know, I believe it was Warner Brothers that had to deal with Prince, who was a bit of a douche. He wasn't entirely wrong. Don't get me wrong. I know people are going to be out there like, Prince was right. Prince was right. Okay? Prince was right. But some of the ways he went about things were wrong. Same thing with Michael Jackson. Sometimes people can be right, but the way they go about things is wrong. But when you make so much money for a certain group of people, you can get away with it. That's just business. It's good business too, for the most part. You can have an asshole top quarterback, but if he's scoring all the points and your team is winning, you're not going to be able to justify benching him, firing him, sending him home, or whatever. Only until the team starts losing can you justify getting rid of him. That's just the nature of the beast. If you've never been in that kind of position before, or you've never seen anybody or experienced anybody being in that position before, you can't really understand it. But it's just a fact that people will forgive personal failings if it makes good business sense. Okay? That's just one for all the children out there. Let's get back to this article. While some pundits would claim that Punk's firing exposed AEW as a minor league company unable to handle a true top star, he put top in scare quotes, the real damage that Punk did to AEW was done almost entirely before he was fired. Punk took away AEW's external innocence and optimism for a better wrestling future and replaced it with the traditional divisiveness and drama that has become all too familiar for wrestling fans. He took away their external innocence and optimism. He deflowered AEW. He took advantage of them. He drugged them, and he Bill Cosby AEW. Can you believe that? They were slip one and Tony Khan's drinking. He didn't even know it. He took their he took their innocence. Oh my God. Oh Lord, have mercy. Oh brother. Oh brother. Do you see where we going with this now? Do you see where we going with this now? All right. When AEW first started, one of the most outstanding things about the company was the unification of its fan base. Fans may have liked different things about the show, and they may have had different things that annoyed them about the product. But in general, AEW was viewed by its own fans as a positive place that respected wrestling fans and delivered an alternative product to what American fans have been used to seeing on major cable television. A part of this was that the WWE served as a common enemy. This evil corporation had put a stranglehold on wrestling for decades while delivering an increasingly banal product that was insulting to many longtime fans. The hopes and dreams of AEW provided something different than WWE. United fans who were willing to give AEW a shot, and that helped create a sense of optimism and pride within wrestling fans that this new and exciting product could work. All right, let's stop right here for a second. Okay? So they, instead of being actually good, they did the cult thing, which is what we all said, and they decided to unite around dislike, right? So instead of uniting around love, you unite around fear, and you unite around hatred. Let me tell you something, brother. Whenever people are united in being anti something, it doesn't work out. I was always told, one of the few things my dad told me when I was young is never actually join any organization that defines itself negatively. In other words, if something is only in existence in opposition to something else, and it doesn't have a reason to exist in its own right, you have no business joining that organization. So, to me, when I see that WWE was the common enemy, that means that the thing that was bringing these people together wasn't AEW, it was WWE. So, as long as people hated WWE, it was fine. When people stopped hating WWE, though, then what happens? Oh, I don't know. What do you do when you stop hating it? That doesn't make you love AEW. You still hate WWE. You just, don't really care about that much about AEW. And that led to a lot of the Japanese wrestling fans, right? They hate WWE too. But they genuinely love wrestling in Japan. They unite over their love of wrestling in Japan. Their love of lucha libre in Mexico, or whatever. I like the word banal. Let's use that. Whatever banal product they're putting out in Europe. You can't unite over hatred. Not for the long term. That's how you fight like World War II. You can fight World War II. You can create a strategic alliance, but it's not going to work for the long term. You can't build around hatred. That's cult behavior, brother. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. And then also, this is a very rosy view of the AEW fan base, because I remember there was a lot of people who didn't like Cody. A lot of them. And they were not shy about it either. They hated the Codyverse. They would say those exact words. The Codyverse sucks. The Codyverse is stupid, etc. So, yeah, there was a lot of people out there that was not joyous about the product. There was also some uneasiness about Jericho. But let's see where he goes with this. But he's not entirely wrong. That hatred of WWE did create the perfect fan base for AEW. All right, so let's get back to this thing. When AEW first signed Punk, it was probably the most powerful sense of unity in company history. Here was a wrestler who had quit WWE and become a symbol of fan angst against a McMahon-led product. And while he was miserable in WWE, he had come back to wrestling through AEW and was back to deliver at the highest level. That period would become an end as Punk, in his own peculiar way, set out to make enemies in the company. It became obvious to fans during his feud with Hangman Adam Page during the spring of 2022 and exploded in his crazed diatribe against Page, the Young Bucks, and other members of the roster during the post-show press conference at All Out, leading to a physical altercation with the Bucks and Kenny Omega that saw all parties suspended. Wait a minute. So this was pretty much a random explosion of crazed anger at CM Punk. We're not going to mention at all that he went through months and months of people playing with his name in the media, right? We're not going to. Why would you leave that part out? Why would you leave out the part that there was weeks and weeks of these people playing with this man's name? Talking about how he got Colt Cabana fired, or how Hangman Page was being disrespectful, even if it was just minor. And I do believe it was minor. I don't think if CM Punk had kept his cool and not said anything, nobody ever would have noticed anything was wrong between his situation with Hangman Page. Nobody would have known. But because Punk couldn't hold it in, everybody found out. But those guys, they created a lot of that animosity. It wasn't that he just blew up out of nowhere. Like, I'm the man now, so I could just stand here and talk my... No. It was weeks and weeks of these people playing with this man's name in public. Running his name through the mud. Saying that he got stroke and that he was banning dudes like Colt Cabana from TV and stuff. That's what happened. If you were writing something and you weren't trying to make the argument that CM Punk deflowered the young virgin AEW, you would tell the truth. That the Elite had just as much to do with this as CM Punk does. But they don't care about this, man. Let's go into the rest of this, okay? Holy hell. Okay. By doing that, which means blowing up, Punk had widened a rift in the unity AEW fans felt about the product. Publicly declaring himself as an enemy of the Elite, he exploited a neoconservative ideology that had existed since before the company started. Punk had become a proxy in the never-ending war some pundits, most notably Jim Cornette, had against the Young Bucks for doing too many flips and ruining the wrestling business. Punk, the company's biggest star, had become a mascot for this viewpoint, and Punk's continued provocations of the Elite, and to be fair, the Elite had their share of snarky retorts, only inflamed those tensions. Wait a minute. So they only had snarky retorts. They didn't actually help start this garbage. It was only the snarky retorts. That's what it was. It was only their snarky retorts. Like when they came back and mocked the biting and botched the buckshot lariat. And that's all they did was they came out and they made a couple of jokes when they came back from suspension. They weren't using proxy violence, Meltzer and Alvarez and all those guys. Nah, they weren't doing that. No, it didn't happen. But here's the thing that has gotten everybody into a tizzy. Punk exploited a neoconservative ideology that had existed since before the company started. A neoconservative ideology. What? What are you talking about? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What neoconservative ideology? Why did you not explain what this term means? I know what the term neoconservative means. Okay, I get it. What it basically means is what traditional conservatism is what they used to call. I'm not going to go into it. All right, but neoconservatism is basically new. Neo means new, so new conservative ideology. But that would be applied to political opinions, not to wrestling opinions. What do you mean? And then he says some pundits, most notably Jim Cornette, I'm guessing you mean conservative in a traditional sense then. In so much as to conserve something, therefore Jim Cornette will be a conservative in so much that he prefers the old school wrestling style. Okay, so that means it wouldn't be political at all. So we could take out the political context and imply that you're not saying that Jim Cornette is a neoconservative, because he is not. He is in no way a conservative. This is a guy who threatened to shoot Brock Lesnar and then now wants to ban guns. This is a guy who engages in orgies. So he's not like, he's a guy who doesn't have children and doesn't want them. So he's not like a family values. He's also an atheist. So he's not like a Bible thumping, family values, Christian conservative in the sense that you would use a term like neoconservative in order to explain where he comes from in his position. It may say, you would probably use a term like old school, or traditionally conservative in terms of pro wrestling. But to use a neoconservative gives it a political context that does not apply to Jim Cornette, because he has no neoconservative ideals whatsoever. He has almost no conservative ideals whatsoever, outside of, his views that all pro wrestling should look like Mid-South or something. So everybody got all tight-assed about the whole neoconservative thing, which was absolutely humorous. But I just thought it was funny. So we got that CM Punk came into the lovely land of everybody is friends, and he created the divisiveness in the company and made people choose sides. So that's what we got so far. So let's continue. Instead of WWE becoming the primary enemy for AEW fans, the enemy was internal. Now, here's my question. Why did you need to have an enemy in the first place? Who is WWE's enemy? Answer that question. As you sit back and you think about this article, what's WWE's enemy? Who is their enemy? Who are they created in opposition to? Now, understand, initially, when a lot of these wrestling companies were created, they were created, the WWF, was because of issues with the NWA. But the NWA doesn't exist anymore. So how do you continue to exist when you don't have an enemy? Well, this is the problem with being a quote-unquote challenger brand, is that you have defined yourself not as what you are, but as what you are not, which is, again, defining yourself in the negative, which is why you shouldn't do such things. It's crazy. WWE doesn't have an enemy. So it says, continuing, you sided with either Punk and his camp or the Elite and his camp. Wrestlers who mostly just minded their own business would get sucked into being viewed as loyal to Punk or loyal to the Elite, depending on who they interacted with on both or on and off screen. The unity that AEW had from the start was shattered, torn apart due to Punk's actions and his public comments against leading members of the company. Now, this part is true. A lot of people came out as, hey, I'm Punk's friend and I love Punk. And other people are like, Punk's a cancer. I can't stand him. But then again, who started that? Who really started that? Again, it started in the media first. It started with certain people in the media being anti-CM Punk. And then other people like Brandon Cutler and other folks like that retweeting and co-signing those comments. That's where that stuff came from. Punk didn't create that. because he didn't create none of those comments. It wasn't just him either, by the way. There was other people. Malachi Black, for instance, who was talking about how he didn't like how certain things were leaking to the media and they were getting out, and he had to start making videos about it because he didn't like it. So it wasn't just Punk. They were spreading rumors about a lot of different guys. A lot. And it was becoming a problem there for a second. And then it kind of calmed down a little bit. But then it started back up. Because all this people being angry at Malachi Black and saying he doesn't want to work singles matches and he should just go back to WWE. They're doing the same thing with Andrade, right? He should just get out of here. Just let him go. He posted a picture with him and CM Punk smiling. Oh my God, what a horrible guy. It's like he posted a picture with the two of them smiling. Come on. Anyway, things only got more dramatic when Collision debuted, with AEW and Khan implying that the show would basically be CM Punk's primary domain. Fans would then compare the action on Dynamite and Collision and pick a side on which was better, despite the shows ultimately being very similar. That's a fact. Instead of comparing them to Raw or SmackDown, the war AEW was involved in was a civil war within itself, and with it came the destruction of a lot of fan trust and faith in the company. Make no mistake about it, without Punk, this was probably happening anyway. The honeymoon period in wrestling would never last forever. Other non-Punk wrestlers would certainly be capable of rocking the boat, and the feelings that Punk exploited with his war against the Young Bucks were already there. Well, you wrote all this article out. You wrote all this crap. Knowing that you were going to say this near the end. Instead of just saying, near the beginning, to be honest, that there was some people who were not happy with guys like Jericho or guys like Cody and, stuff like the Codyverse and how they felt like, Cody was on a completely different show sometimes. And people would say like it would feel like it's schizophrenic because Cody's product would be different than what the Young Bucks and all those guys are doing. And they termed it the Codyverse. And people would say how much they hated the Codyverse or how people would say how much they liked Cody when he was doing. And then Cody was gone. And then everybody was glad Cody was gone. And then they started burning t-shirts and all that kind of stuff too. But we ain't going to talk about that. We ain't here to talk about that. Even though all that happened before CM Punk got fired, by the way, right? So people were pretty angry internally at AEW because some people were fans of Cody. And then they felt like Cody got ran out of town. But you're not allowed to talk about that. You have to pretend that didn't happen in order to write this article. Especially to write this article the way that he wrote it. Let's finish this up. Punk, being the biggest star in the company, and being extraordinarily public about his dislike of the Elite, though, blew up the issues until they were put an untenable focus on them, away from the strength of the product, and instead on the backstage drama and whether or not everyone could coexist in a professional atmosphere. AEW was always going to have a transition away from the honeymoon period, and some wrestlers were going to be publicly unhappy in the company. That is just the business. But Punk's eruptions and ultimate dismissal from the company was probably the most extreme and dramatic transition that the company could undergo. And rebuilding the trust and unification within the AEW fan base is going to take a very long time to rebuild because of it. Okay. So for starters, let me tell you, that's not happening. If you think that there's going to be any rebuilding, you can forget it. Because there is going to be people out there who are never going to forgive you for running off Cody and for running off Punk and for running off Jade Cargill. It's not going to happen. There's going to be people now who are going to look at you and say, you dorks ruined what could have been a fun wrestling company. You guys are making me watch WWE because you ran off the guys that I wanted to see. But it's not just that, though. The further along we go with AEW, the more a lot of the other gripes that people have with them become more and more prominent. What I remember, I was actually defending AEW at the time when they were being attacked over race issues. They didn't push enough black wrestlers. There weren't any black wrestlers winning singles belts and this kind of stuff. Remember that I did videos on it. That people were saying AEW has a race problem, and there was a lot of black wrestling fans who were what was it Big Nasty, or what the hell is his real name, Alfred Konuwa, and all of those guys. They were pretty much every other week tearing into AEW about their black problem and how they don't push enough black wrestlers. And then there was, how much time does Tony Khan give to the women's division? Look, you can blame it on CM Punk all you want, but there was tons of divisions there. People who don't like Jericho, the people who didn't like Punk, the people who didn't like that they weren't pushing enough black wrestlers, the people who didn't like that they weren't pushing enough women. There was tons of little schisms there. So to think that, once we heal from the Punk thing, we're going to be all right. No, that's naive, brother. That's naive, baby. It's not real. It's not. It's not real. Okay? If you're going to try to fix a problem, you got to admit the problem exists. The problem was that AEW's fan base was it was unified in negativity. It wasn't unified in a, hey, let's just try to do this wrestling thing a little bit different. It was WWE bad, AEW good. And then Tony Khan would put his foot in his mouth occasionally. Maybe he'll make a comment and that'll rile up the WWE fan base, or even worse, he'll piss off part of his own fan base, like what he did with the comment with Big Swole. And then ultimately how he treated Leo Rush, who was the only person who stood up for Big Swole. That's two black wrestlers. That fed into the fan base who was talking about how black wrestlers don't get a fair shot in AEW. The first thing they can look at is he never made any kind of negative comments about a wrestler except Big Swole, who was a black woman. And the only person who stood up for her was a black man in Leo Rush. And Leo Rush lost his job for it. Crazy, right? Now, WWE fans, we have those problems too. And sometimes these racial things pop up every now and again. Most of the time, people argue their points and then they move on. But AEW, because they are, I guess you want to use the word progressive, and I think you can even use that term politically in terms of, their views on Sonny Kiss and Nyla Rose and people like that, then it was a little bit different. Because you're taught that this kind of stuff matters a lot, instead of it's an annoyance that we need to deal with every once in a while. Like the whole, Jordan Miles situation, when everybody was kind of like, what is this? And then other people was like, Vince going to Vince. And WWE is still racist after all these years. And then they moved on and kept, talking about how much they love Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns. And then just moved on. I mean, it's just how it is. WWE fans know how to get into it, and then they unite over how much they love the bloodline or whatever. AEW fans get into the muck and mire of this stuff, and they just start losing their minds. But it ain't CM Punk's fault. Not totally. There was plenty of small schisms there before CM Punk showed up. But it is true that the locker room split into people who wanted to work with Punk and wanted to be on Collision, and people who wanted to work with the Elite and wanted to be on Dynamite. And then there was a lot of people in the middle. There was people who were not friendly with the Elite and therefore had difficulty getting on television, and they kind of went to the Collision side. There was a lot of green talent who were not getting a big opportunity, guys like Powerhouse Hobbs, guys like Ricky Starks. And it wasn't that they disliked the Elite. It was that CM Punk was offering them opportunities. And so they went with the guy who was offering opportunities versus the guys who were only giving opportunities to their friends. Right? Am I right or am I wrong? This article, as written, the narrative that they're trying to produce is one where Adam and Eve is in the Garden of Eden, and then here comes that slithering Punk, and he whispers into Eve's ear. Eve, I don't know. Eve is like certain fans. So Adam would be certain fans, probably the people who were there from the beginning. Eve would be the fans that were brought in when CM Punk came in, the people that they gained over time. Yeah, I like where I'm going with this. Okay, so Tony Khan in this situation, he would be God, right? God creates Adam. So Adam would be the AEW fan base, the original AEW fan base, the people who are there because they love the elite. They love Hangman Page and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and they don't mind that, Brandon Cutler is there. They don't mind that, the guy with what was the lube guy? What was his name? Michael Nakazawa. They don't mind that he's there. They don't mind it. And then, because Tony Khan is a loving God, he spent all his money to create Eve. And then this was all of the fans who came to AEW because of CM Punk. And because he spent the money on, bringing that guy in. So then that's lapsed fans, that's new fans. Those people came in. Those people were CM Punk fans. So then CM Punk himself, he would just be the serpent. Right? He comes in, he whispers to his fans, these guys, all these Adams, we're going to give them the knowledge of good and evil. Even though Tony Khan don't want us to do it, we're going to tell the truth about those assholes over there. And then his fans, the Eves, they're like, wait a minute, those guys doing what over there? And Tony Khan's like, what you doing? What you doing? You can't do that. And all of a sudden, everybody gets booted out of the garden. But the only people who got kicked out of the garden was Eve and the snake. What God probably should have done in the first place, he only kicked out Eve and the snake. All the fans who came with Punk and Punk got kicked out. Adam, and he got to stay and play with all his friends. And he's all lonely and it's empty. He in the garden by himself now, which is, I guess, what he wanted in the whole place. I guess what he wanted the whole time. That analogy went way off the rails. I'm questioning whether it's sacrilegious or not, but I don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Anyway, that's the story that we're talking about here, right? That everything was fine until the Fire Nation attacked. That probably would have been a better analogy. Less biblical. Same concept. Everything was fine. Everybody was happy until Fire Lord Punk showed up and started. This is so stupid. This is such a stupid story. It's not real. All right? Punk didn't do all this stuff. He certainly ain't do it by himself. All right? So, chill. All right? These guys are dorks. I love beating up on these dorks. All right, man. I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you guys for your time. Peace out.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, daddy.